Let's get started. Dear participants, good afternoon. We start this series of thematic reports on capacity building. And allow me to introduce you, Guido Gluschke, Director, Institute for Security and Safety, Brandenburg University of Applied Sciences. And he will be speaking on building on a cybersecurity education in the nuclear energy sector.
Good afternoon, everybody. My talk is about capacity building, cybersecurity capacity building in the energy and especially in the nuclear sector, where we worked for a while. Okay, so after a short introduction, I will talk about our activities we have done in the recent years, which are master's programs, professional development courses, advanced training courses, exercises, and an outlook to digitalized learning. And at the end, I will give some conclusions and some ideas on our problems, challenges when implementing such programs. So our institute belongs to the Brandenburg University, which is a small university near Berlin, in Germany. And it was founded in 1992, so after a union of Germany, to bring young people into this area, which is the eastern part of Germany, or was the eastern part of Germany. And so that was an old military building, which is now used as a university. The university has around about 3,000 students, and the fields of studies are engineering, information science, media, and economy. And of course, most people are living in Berlin and not living in Brandenburg, where the university is, unfortunately. Our institute was founded in 2012 by Professor Hollamy, and that time, and it's more or less the same today, it acts as an interface between the university and international organizations. So in 2012, the International Atomic Energy Agency asked us to run professional development courses to train people in cybersecurity in the nuclear field. I will come to that later. And the university had no chance to implement that because of legal problems. So our institute was funded to act as this interface. In between, we are working with most international organizations in terms of cybersecurity and nuclear security, and we are an UN accredited organization, and since this year we are also an ITU Center of Excellence, which means that that's a special status, a training center for the International Telecommunication Union. And we are a founding member of the IEA International Nuclear Security Education Network, INSEN, that was founded 2010, I guess, 2011. And INSEN is a really powerful network with around 180 members from 64 countries at the new figures, so acting around the world to disseminate nuclear security education. There are some Russian organizations also members of INSEN. We also worked on most relevant documents on cybersecurity in the nuclear field. Nearly every international publication we were involved in, and especially some more energy-related things in the last couple of years, like a document from European Union or a new book we published with colleagues from Turkey. Most documents are available on our website or via links from our website. Not every document is publicly available. But you can find them on our website. As said, our main focus is capacity building, competence building. That's why we are there. And so let's have a look on this projects and programs. The first one is our master's program, so Master in Nuclear Security. We were asked by the International Atomic Energy Agency first time in, I think it was 2012 or 2013, to implement such a program. And there was a first pilot program, which was funded by European Union at that time, to implement the program. We did this. The project leader was Delft University, but Delft wasn't able to get an accreditation for that and wasn't able to implement the program at the end. So the IEA asked us again, or I think it was an international tender at the end, to implement a master's program. And we developed it in 2016, more or less, 2016, 2017, and now we are running it in the third time, and it's the second time at our university in between. The courses which are comprised by this program, you can see here are security management, then an international law and risk part, then physical protection and computer security, a nuclear security part, and some elective courses which can be chosen by the students. And at the end, some research and academic work and a master's thesis. That's what is in the program. Computer security is one part of it. And to have a look at the whole framework, if you want to do a career in this field, then you need 210 European credits as a basis to run our program, and then you can get 90 credits from the red one, that's our master's program, on top of it to get a master in nuclear security or security management. And then you can go to this job or do a PhD or whatever you would like to do. So the program itself is implemented as a distance learning program. That was one of the prerequisites from the IEA. So they asked us to implement it this way because, especially in the nuclear field, you have a couple of problems with visas, getting into country or inviting students from specific countries. And as this program was funded by IEA, from the perspective of IEA, it's not possible to exclude people or countries from studying this program. So we had to find an approach which allows everybody in the world to do the program, and we implemented this as a distance learning model with content on our platform, and also distance learning exercises, exams, and so on. We now have students from Brazil, Chad, Eritrea, Sierra Leone, Netherlands, Germany, Kenya, Ghana, Malawi, Uganda, Zimbabwe. Yeah, and so there might be some more this year. But as I said, we are running this second time now, second term. Now coming to the professional development courses. That's what I told you was asked by the IEA in 2012. To start with that, it was our very first activity. So the idea was, and that's a very interesting approach, because this approach might help also in the cybersecurity domain to come to better results as we have today in terms of capacity building. The approach they had us, or they were asked, nuclear security was new at IEA. And you have to know that nuclear security is not part of this, or was not part of the status of IEA, and especially the colleagues from Russia came always into the meetings and said, nuclear security is nation states' responsibilities, so we are not accepting what you're doing here. But that's only, today we are working together with the Russian colleagues, and but at that time it was a really hard fight. It was not only Russia, some other countries had problems with it too. So the question was how to implement a new program and new topics, new things into the community, into the nuclear security community, which is, as I said, very sensitive area and topic. And so IAEA decided to do that as a train-the-trainers program. So not working with practitioners in the first step, but working with academic. So we invited, at that time, when we started this program and developed this program, we invited teachers from academia, mostly from universities, to come to Brandenburg, to our university, and be part of this PDC. Yeah, which means we invited them to come to first PDC week, and that was a week where they learned about the topic. Then they got homework. They went back into their home countries. Then there was a homework phase, typically 2 to 3 months, where they had to work on this topic. And then they came back and they showed us how to teach the topic. That was the approach we did that time. And so we started very early in the, let's say, whole supply chain of nuclear, implementing cybersecurity at the very beginning of everything. Because in most countries, academia is part of nuclear development. I think that's the same in Russia too, with MIFI, for example. So starting at that point was a very good idea, to build in cybersecurity into the basis of knowledge. And it worked very well. At the first time, we didn't have this textbook, the black one, so that was not there in 2012. It came, I think, late 2012, early 2013. And that was a document which was developed by us and some colleagues from Finland, where we wrote chapters on the different topics in cybersecurity. And that helped us to improve our approach in teaching and learning. So the second phase, let's say, second phase of the PDCs, so we run 4 PDCs. I think there's a third and fourth PDC we run with this model, as we learned that people didn't have any knowledge about INC. INC stands for instrumentation and control, which is the nuclear word for ICS, so industrial control systems. That is a term which is used in the nuclear field. So people had no idea on what that means in terms of nuclear facilities. So we started with introducing that topic, and then we went into different fields of cybersecurity. On the one hand, the topics which were given by the IAEA documents we had to follow, because that was also paid by IAEA. On the other hand, we added some, and that's a blue box, we added some nuclear-specific elements, nuclear-specific topics. The reason for that is that there are some specific elements, like insider threats, which is insider threat. It's a very much a nuclear topic, or things like a holistic approach, or interplay with security domains, which means the security-safety interface, or the security-safety safeguards interface, so-called 3Ss. So there are some very specific elements which were there in the nuclear field, but which were not adapted to cyber at all. So we adapted it by working with the colleagues from IAEA and some other experts in the world to develop the content for this cybersecurity PDC. Yeah? And then the same as said, and then they went home and did the homework, came back and presented the results. Here are some pictures, classroom work. This is one group here, that are the colleagues from Russia, for example, with someone from Jamaica at the time, and the task was to develop a zone model, which means a network zone model. I guess everybody in the room knows what I mean. And these were 3 results of the work. You can see that was a Russian, Jamaican one, very structured, very clear, up to very creative zones, more like bubbles. And that kind of work was done that time to educate those people who had, at the end, no knowledge in cyber at all when they started to work with us. We also integrated our ICS lab, which was an interesting task because this ICS lab wasn't part of our own department. So we were in cybersecurity, but that was a completely different department at the university. And so they struggled to work with us together because they didn't understand why cybersecurity should be an issue. And they had no understanding because the way how those guys are thinking, and that was also a very interesting thing I learned from the discussions is they said, we are only getting requests how to build up a technical function, for example, how to implement a request we are getting. And that's all we have to do. So if the request is fulfilled, we are ready with our work. Nobody thought about cybersecurity in the context of ICS systems at the time. They were not interested in having or discussing this topic. So that's exactly why it was a good idea from IEF starting at the university level. Yeah? And after we discussed with the guy who runs the lab, after our work with them, they started to thinking about security in ICS. That was the first time when they started to think about security in ICS systems. They never discussed this before in their courses, which is, of course, a big problem. I think the discussion today was a couple of times. I heard the critical infrastructure session, and so people said, yeah, we don't have ICS systems which are secure. And that's exactly the reason why these guys have no idea why they should secure something. Yeah? They are only thinking in functional elements and not thinking in non-functional requirements. That was one of the learnings. So, yeah, as said, we run 4 of these IT cybersecurity PDCs in 2012 to 2014. There's 59 participants from 21 countries, and I guess Russian colleagues were there in every of these 4 PDCs. So we had a very good relationship to the colleagues from Russia, and so I think they were there all the time. And then we did some advanced training courses. Most of them we supported were run by IEA. So the IEA itself is running training courses. They're calling it training courses, basic training and advanced training courses, regional courses, national courses. And for example, this is one, that's the one in India. I went in Mumbai to run this course based on a hypothetical facility data book, which was used by the IEA to run cybersecurity courses. But we supported those courses and also other ones like from US Department of Energy, the nuclear session or nuclear section, where I was sent by the US colleagues to Moscow to support the Russian-US program, also in cybersecurity issues, the nuclear sector. Yeah, so I said hypothetical facilities and mock-ups were used in these trainings usually. Which is one model and one possibility. I also worked with colleagues in Obninsk, and in Obninsk they have also something like this. This is a US model, but I looked to the one in Obninsk, which is something similar. We also implemented a course which was funded by NATO, Science for Peace and Security program. That was cyber defense in the context of energy security. That was an activity in Kiev to support the Ukrainian colleagues in this field. And yeah, coming to exercises. Exercise is an interesting part because there are, especially in the nuclear field, there are not too many players. The first exercise we supported was the one in NATO, CCDCOE, that is a unit in NATO unit in Tallinn, and they have once a year, they have this lock shield exercise, and they ask us in 2015 or in 2014 to support them in terms of ICS equipment, so bringing ICS into their scenario. The scenario is this one, and that was a drone research facility, so a virtual drone facility. And so they asked us to implement something which is similar to the Aurora attack. Probably, I'm not sure if you know the Aurora project. That was a project financed by DHS and run by Idaho National Lab. And they showed that it's possible to run a cyber attack against a generator and to destroy the generator physically. I think that was the very first officially shown activity where a cyber attack could result in a physical damage. And the colleagues in Tallinn asked us to do the same. Yeah, but I said, yes, it's nice for us, but I'm not able to buy a 10 million generator to destroy that. Yeah? So I'm not DHS. So we did the same on a simulator here. You can see it this way. And we integrated that into the environment of NATO CCD-COE, so that the blue teams who had to defend those environments were able to defend or to learn how to defend attacks against ICS systems and physical systems. So we simulated a part of that generator, and so it was the first time, and it was a really good approach to implement that into the environment, and we learned from that. And later we supported Guardtime, cybersecurity. They are also sitting in Tallinn and supporting the UK nuclear sector with exercises, and we used more or less the same setting or similar setting in that. And then we supported the new IEA international training course on cybersecurity in December 2018, which was run at the AAT in Vienna. They built SCADA and physical protection systems, which are similar to what we are doing, or we have done in exercise 2. You can see it on the next slide. But what I want to mention here is, if you think about exercises and want to run that, exercises are typically a week long. That's how we are doing it, regardless if it's an IEA course or it's Guardtime or NATO. It's more or less a week, but the preparation time for an exercise is between half a year and a year. Only to have that in mind. It's a really big issue if you want to do that. So we also did a cybersecurity exercise for the Kazakhstan nuclear sector. So the colleagues from Kazakhstan came to us, and we had a meeting with them in Berlin and discussed how to build up an exercise which was at that time built on top of their educational activities. And so we implemented that, and for that exercise we developed a very specific technical things. So one of those SCADA systems, and this is an environment where we could show attacks against physical protection systems, because that is what they wanted. On the one hand, attacks against SCADA, and on the one hand, attacks against physical protection systems. And so we implemented that. You can see here some SCADA elements as a practical part, and as said, some attacks against different physical protection elements like CCD, CV, video stream, or access cards, or things like this. How to hack this, or not how to hack it, but how to defend a hack. That was run in February this year. Last thought is on the new things we are doing. So we developed e-learning modules, as I've said. We also developed a dynamic 3D environment. That's also a nuclear facility, a Russian star research facility, because a colleague who did it comes from this area. So we are able to use this 3D environment to train people, especially in the physical protection area, but also in some elements of cyber. We are now thinking about how to integrate cyber into such a model. And we are also playing with virtual reality and augmented reality elements in the 3D model. And next year, or end of this year, next year we will work with micro-learning approaches, which are completely new approaches, which might be interesting for some kind of learning. If somebody is interested in learning more about this, and we also have the online demos available, then you can contact me, or you can contact Dimitro, which developed these tools. implementation. So some lessons learned. What was the problem? What worked? What worked not? If you work in this international field like we did, then the very first thing we had to struggle with, or which was a challenge, is the question of nationality, culture, and background. And it has to do with the fact that, for example, we had a couple of PDCs where we have colleagues from the Arabic, from Arabic countries like Morocco, Egypt, and so on, and they told us that there are no words for cyber security. So how to deal with that? And also with the colleagues from Russia who told me, we are speaking about information security and not computer security or cyber security, and that is probably sounds a little bit like a mirror problem, but at the end it's really a big problem, because you need a common understanding on what you're talking about. Especially a question of definition and understanding is the very first one you have to address and you have to understand. Otherwise, you're doing a course 1 week, and some people were not able to understand what you mean and what the goals of this course are. Another thing is, of course, I said the second point, I mentioned this, that we have no IT-related terms in all languages. Then we have, for example, probably you know that, the question of different words for security and safety. In some languages the same, even in the German language, it's more or less one word, which is Sicherheit, and we use Sicherheit for security and for safety, but that makes it in some points very difficult to discuss, especially if you have distinguished between those things, for example, in nuclear. Another thing is that different understandings of organizational groups, target groups like IT and ICS engineers, which were not able to talk to each other. So that there are a couple of problems when especially dealing in the cyber world with international courses. You have to prepare that, you have to discuss this in advance to be prepared and to know exactly what kind of wording you want to use. My last slide is on our practical implementation approach. So our idea is always to come from awareness, knowledge, sustainability to improvement, which means today if we talk about, let's say, organizational capacity building, then we are looking for all employees, and probably employees in scope, specific groups of employees, up to individuals. And now we have a complete, let's say, a complete number of courses and programs to help nation states, but also organizations to implement education as regarding to their needs. Okay, so far, thanks a lot for attention. And
Guido, спасибо большое за интересный доклад.
Thank you for your interesting report, Guido. If the audience has any questions, we'll be welcome to answer them.
Aliya Zaripova, Sputnik France Media. I wanted to ask you that according to some apocalypse scenarios, there is a possibility of the end of our world because of lack of cybersecurity in nuclear or energetic sections. What is your vision to this possibility, or if it's not possible at all? Thanks.
Could you probably repeat the question, because I only understood part of that.
There are some scenarios, apocalypse scenarios, that our world can end because of lack of cybersecurity in this nuclear or energetic sections. What's your vision of this problem?
Of the nuclear, and what was the second one?
Energetic. Energy, yeah.
So you mean what the problem is, that we don't have enough people there and don't have enough education there? Yeah. But that is not specific to any country or any region. So we have the same problem in Germany, for example, and especially in the energy and especially in the nuclear sector, as we have a very high number of legacy systems, so very old systems, which are known only by a couple of people, only a few vendors who produce things, and it's also unclear how much digitalization is in these components. So the only approach I could see, which is more or less working and good, is the IAEA approach, because IAEA did a very clear strategy on how to educate and train people. In the energy sector, I'm not able to see this in this way. Yeah, so we don't have programs in the energy sector. I don't see programs in the energy sector on cybersecurity which would fulfill the needs I can see today. Yeah, so, sorry for that, but I can't see it. Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm always talking to people, but we don't get funding. Even we don't get funding for setting up such courses. Yeah.
Alexander Tolstoy, MIFI.
Alexander Tolstoy, Moscow Institute of Physics, Cybersecurity Department. Thank you for your interesting report. I have one question and maybe a suggestion. So first, could you please say which Russian universities do you have contacts with? Which universities do you have official contacts with? This is my first question.
Currently we are not working with specific organizations. We worked, when we started to work with INSENG in the very first years, we worked with MIFI, and there were 2 or 3 additional universities, I don't have the names ready now, which later didn't showed up at INSENG. So the Russian policy, to my understanding, was that they wanted only to have very few universities. And one of those, which is not a university, more training center, is a training center of Rosatom. So the Obninsk one, yeah, and I was there and discussed to work together, yeah, but until today there was no basis for that, yeah, so no contract. Once we discussed the contract and supporting them, by the end I did a couple of tries, but that was never successful.
Well, it would be interesting for us, so we would be willing to continue these contacts. And I also have a suggestion. Based on what you said, it's important to have a clear terminology and understanding of terminology. And there are some problems in translating documents from one language to another, because we have foreign students at our university, and we see that may be a problem. So maybe it's time to develop some sort of handbook to bring some order into these linguistic differences between terms. So if you would be interested, we feel that this would be very important, and this would be a very important contribution. Thank you.
Thanks for this suggestion. Yeah, I'm happy to support this idea and this initiative. Yeah, and probably we can talk about this afterwards.